The stars used to sing with the voices of 1,000 worlds. Now they whispered in fear. Commander Zalith pressed his blue-scaled hand against the cold metal wall of the hidden station. Through the thick glass he could see nothing but empty space and distant stars. 3 months ago, this same view would have shown him the bright lights of trading ships, passenger vessels, and military patrols moving between the planets. Now there was only darkness and silence. "Sir, another system has gone dark," reported Lieutenant Cathara from her station. Her voice shook as she spoke. "The Terran sector. All communication has stopped." Zalith closed his eyes. The Terran sector had over 40 billion people living on 12 different worlds. Now they were gone. Just like the vegan colonies, just like the Centauri trade hub, just like hundreds of other systems that had vanished in the past year, the enemy had no name that could be spoken in any known language. The survivors called them the Devourers, though even that word felt too small for what they truly were. They came from the void between stars, in ships that looked like a nightmare made real. Metal and flesh twisted together in ways that hurt to look at. They consumed everything in their path. Planets, stars, entire solar systems disappeared into their endless hunger. "How long until they reach us here?" Zalith asked. Cathara checked her instruments. Her hands moved quickly over the glowing controls. "At their current speed, maybe 2 weeks. 3, if we're lucky." Zalith nodded slowly. 3 weeks to live. 3 weeks before this hidden station would be found and consumed like everything else. He looked around the command center at the faces of his crew. They came from 6 different species. They all wore the same expression. Fear, hopelessness, the look of people who knew they were going to die. The station shook suddenly. Red lights flashed across all the control panels and alarms started beeping loudly. "What was that?" Zalith demanded. "Incoming ship, sir," Cathara said. Her voice was tight with worry. "It's badly damaged. The ship is leaking air and power. Are they friendly?" "Yes, sir. It's the Council ship Brightwing. Captain Morden is asking for permission to dock." Zalith felt a small spark of hope in his chest. Captain Morden was one of the best military officers in the Council fleet. If anyone could bring good news, it would be him. 10 minutes later, Captain Morden walked into the command center. Zalith barely recognized him, the proud Korthok warrior, who had once stood 8 feet tall, now moved like an old man. His red scales were dull and cracked. His left arm hung uselessly at his side, wrapped in medical bandages. "Captain," Zalith said, "what happened to your ship?" Morden collapsed into a chair. "We tried to stop them at the Vega defense line, 50 ships against 3 of theirs." He laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "We thought we had them. Our new quantum torpedoes cut right through their armor. We damaged 2 of their ships badly." "That sounds like good news," Zalith said. "It was for about 10 minutes, Morden replied. "Then they adapted. Our ships grew new armor that our weapons couldn't touch, learned from our attack patterns, and started moving in ways we couldn't predict. Within an hour, 47 of our ships were destroyed. Only 3 of us escaped." Cathara made a soft sound of despair. "They adapt that quickly." "Faster," Morden said. "It's like fighting an enemy that becomes stronger every time you hit them. Every weapon we use, every tactic we try, they learn from it and become immune. We've been fighting them for a year now, and they've never made the same mistake twice." Zalith sat down heavily in his command chair. The small spark of hope in his chest died completely. "How many ships do we have left in the entire fleet?" "Maybe 300, Morden said. "Scattered across 50 systems, all hiding like we are. Most of them are damaged. Many are running out of supplies." He looked up at Zalith with tired eyes. "We're losing this war badly. At this rate, the entire galaxy will be consumed within 6 months." The command center fell silent. Everyone stared at their instruments, pretending to work while trying not to think about what Morden had just told them. The only sound was the quiet hum of the station's life support systems. "There has to be something," Zalith said finally. "Some weakness we haven't found yet. Some weapon we haven't tried." Morden shook his head slowly. "We've tried everything. Energy weapons, kinetic weapons, biological weapons, even reality-warping technology from the Zephyrian Empire. Nothing works for long. They adapt to it all. What about the other species? Kethera asked. The ones that aren't part of the council? Maybe they have something we don't. The hegemony fell last month, Morden said. The Trade Federation is gone. The independent worlds are being consumed one by one. There's nobody left to ask for help. Izalith stood up and walked to the window again. Outside, the stars looked cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were moving through space, destroying everything in their path. Soon they would come here, and this station would become another silent tomb floating in the void. Sir Cathara said quietly. We haven't discussed. Both Zalith and Morden turned to look at her. She was staring at her computer screen, her face pale with something that might have been fear or hope. What are you talking about? Zalith asked. Cathara's fingers moved. Over her controls, a star map appeared on the main screen, showing a small section of the galaxy's outer rim. One star system was marked in red. The Sol system, she said. The quarantine zone. Morden made a harsh sound in his throat. You can't be serious. What's in the Sol system? Zalith asked. He knew the name from history classes, but the details were unclear. Humans, Kethera said. The species that was quarantined 200 years ago. Zalith remembered now. The humans had been discovered by a council exploration ship in the year 2157. First contact had gone well at first. The humans seemed friendly and eager to join the galactic community. But then the council scientists had studied their homeworld more carefully. Earth was a death world. A planet so dangerous that most council species couldn't survive on its surface for more than a few hours. Deadly weather, poisonous plants, aggressive animals, disease-carrying insects made it one of the most hostile environments in the known galaxy. And the humans had not just survived there, they had thrived. Worse, they had turned their entire planet into a weapon. They had fought constant wars for thousands of years, developing new and better ways to kill each other. There. History was written in blood and violence. When the council scientists saw what humans were capable of, they decided that such a dangerous species could never be allowed to spread to other worlds. A quarantine barrier was built around the Sol system. No human ship was allowed to leave, and no council ship was allowed to enter. For 200 years, the humans had been trapped in their own star system, cut off from the rest of the galaxy. They're monsters, Morden said. Killers from a world of death and violence. That's why they were quarantined in the first place, maybe Cathara said. But they're also survivors. They've lived on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy for thousands of years. They've never given up, no matter how hopeless things seemed. Zalith stared at the red dot on the screen that marked the Sol system. The idea of asking humans for help seemed impossible. They'd been enemies of the Council for 2 centuries. Why would they want to help the people who had imprisoned them? But what other choice did they have? The Devourers were coming, and nothing else had worked. Send a message, Zalith said quietly. Sir? Kethera asked. Send a message to Earth. Zalith repeated, his voice growing stronger. Tell them what's happening. Tell them we need their help. Morden stood up quickly. You can't be serious. They'll probably just laugh at us. Or worse, they might join the Devourers just to get revenge on us. Maybe, Zalith said. But we're going to die anyway if we do nothing. At least this way, we have a chance. He turned back to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere in that darkness, an enemy was coming that could not be stopped by any normal means. But humans weren't normal. They were something else. Entirely something that might just be crazy enough to find a way to win. Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the universe changed forever. He sat in his office aboard Luna Station, looking out at the blue and green marble that was Earth. The view never got old, even after 15 years in the Terran. Defense Force. Coffee in one hand, data pad in the other. He was reading the daily reports when every alarm in the station started screaming at once. Sir, you need to get to the communications center right now, came the voice of Lieutenant Amy Foster over the intercom. Her voice was shaking. Amy had been working communications for 8 years, and Jake had never heard her sound scared before. Jake ran through the corridors of Luna Station, past confused technicians and panicked junior officers. The communications center was in chaos when he arrived. Every screen was flashing red. Every instrument was beeping or buzzing or making some kind of noise. "What's happening?" Jake demanded. Amy looked up from her station, her face pale. "Sir, we're getting signals on the old alien frequencies, the ones that have been silent for 200 years. Jake felt his heart skip a beat. The alien frequencies were part of Earth's most closely guarded secrets. 2 centuries ago, humanity had made contact with an alien civilization called the Galactic Council. For a brief time, it looked like humans would join a vast community of species among the stars. Then came the quarantine. The invisible walls that trapped humanity in their own solar system. It's the silence that had lasted for 200 years. "You sure?" Jake asked. "Yes, sir," Amy said. "The signals are encoded, but our computers are translating them automatically. Sir, they're asking for help." Jake stared at the communication equipment that hadn't been used in generations. His grandfather had been alive during first contact. He had told Jake stories about the excitement, the hope, and then the crushing. Disappointment when the barriers went up around the solar system. "Put it through the speakers," Jake ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was strange, musical, but desperate. The computer translated it into English as it played. "People of Earth, we are the Galactic Council. We know of your quarantine. We know of the reasons our ancestors feared your kind. But we come to you now not as judges, but as those who need help. Our galaxy is dying. We face an enemy we cannot defeat. We have heard stories of your people, of what you call the human spirit, and your refusal to give up, even when facing certain death. We beg you, help us." The message repeated 3 times, then went silent. The communications center was quiet, except for the humming of machines. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. "Get me President Hayes," he said quietly. "Tell her, it's urgent." 3 hours later, Jake stood in the Oval Office in Washington. President Lisa Hayes sat behind her desk, reading the transcript of the alien message for the 5th time. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen humanity through some of its darkest days. "How do we know this isn't a trick?" she asked. "We don't," Jake admitted. "But the signals are coming from all over the galaxy, not just one location. It would be very hard to fake." President Hayes set down the papers and looked out the window. 200 years, Jake. 200 years of silence? They built walls around our entire solar system to keep us locked up, and now they want our help. "Yes, ma'am." "What does your gut tell you?" Jake thought for a moment. "My gut says they're telling the truth. Whatever they're fighting, it must be bad enough to make them desperate. It's bad enough to ask the people they've been afraid of for 2 centuries. President Hayes nodded slowly. "I'm calling an emergency session of the United Earth Assembly. Every nation needs to hear this." 2 days later, representatives from every country on Earth sat in the Great Assembly Hall in Geneva. The room was full of quiet conversations in dozens of languages. Everyone knew something big was happening, but only a few people knew exactly what. President Hayes walked to the podium at the front of the room. The conversation stopped immediately. Every eye was focused on her. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "2 days ago we received a message that changes everything. For the first time in 200 years, the Galactic Council has contacted us." A wave of shocked voices filled the room. People stood up, shouted questions, argued with their neighbors. President Hayes waited patiently for the noise to die down. "They are asking for our help," she continued. "They say their galaxy is being destroyed by an enemy they cannot defeat. They say they need us." Chairman Wei from China raised his hand. "What kind of enemy?" "We don't have many details," President Hayes replied. "But from what they've told us, it's something that consumes entire star systems. Something that learns from every attack and becomes stronger." Prime Minister Johnson from Britain stood up. "Why should we help them? They've kept us prisoners in our own solar system for 2 centuries. They were afraid of us then. I trust them now? Because," said President Hayes, "if this threat is real, if it really is consuming the galaxy, then it will eventually reach us too. The barriers around our solar system won't stop something that can destroy entire star systems." The room fell silent. The implications were clear. Earth wasn't safe just because it was hidden behind the quarantine barriers. There's something else, President Hayes said. According to our xenobiologists, the reason they quarantined us in the first place was because they were afraid of what humans might do if we spread to other worlds. They called Earth a death world. They said we were too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous. She paused and looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. Maybe that's exactly what the galaxy needs right now. Ambassador Chen from the European Federation raised her hand. What exactly are you proposing, Madam President? I'm proposing that we answer their call, President Hayes said. I'm proposing that we show them what humanity is really capable of. Not just our capacity for violence, but our refusal to give up. Our ability to find hope in hopeless situations. Our willingness to fight for people we've never met, on worlds we've never seen. The debate that followed lasted 6 hours. Some representatives argued that humanity owed the Galactic Council nothing. Others said it was too dangerous to get involved in an alien war. Few suggested that this might be humanity's chance for revenge against the species that had imprisoned them. But in the end, the vote was unanimous. Every nation on Earth agreed to the same thing. They would answer the call. President Hayes stood at the podium again as the final votes were counted. By unanimous decision of the United Earth Assembly, we will respond to the Galactic Council's request for aid. We will prepare our fleets, our armies, and our people for war. She looked around the room one more time. For 200 years we have been trapped behind walls, treated like dangerous animals in a cage. They feared what we might become if we were set free. Today we show them they were right to be afraid, but not for the reasons they thought. As the representatives filed out of the assembly hall, Jake Morrison watched from the observation gallery. His heart was pounding with excitement and fear. Manny was about to step onto the galactic stage for the first time in 2 centuries. They were about to meet aliens who saw them as monsters from a death world. Jake smiled grimly. Maybe it was time to show the galaxy what monsters could do when they fought for something they believed in. Within hours, recruitment centers across Earth were flooded with volunteers. The Terran Defense Force, which had spent 2 centuries preparing for a war that never came, suddenly found itself with more volunteers than it could handle. Young people who had grown up staring at the stars and dreaming of adventure, old veterans who remembered the stories their grandparents told about first contact. Scientists who had spent their entire careers studying alien technology they had never been allowed to see. Admiral Chen Lu, the highest-ranking officer in the Terran Defense Force, stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, humanity's most advanced warship. Through the view screen, he could see the construction yards working around the clock to prepare the fleet. Ships that had been mothballed for decades were being brought back into service. New weapons were being installed. Supply ships were being loaded with everything from medical supplies to nuclear warheads. "Sir," said his aide, Commander Julie. "Parker, we've received another message from the Galactic Council. They're sending coordinates for a meeting point at the edge of Council space." "How long until we can be ready?" Admiral Lu asked. 8. "The first wave of ships can be ready in 3 days," Parker replied. "The full battle fleet will take 2 weeks." Admiral Lu nodded. "Send the response. Tell them we're coming." He looked out at Earth one more time. In 3 days, human ships would leave the solar system for the first time in 200 years. They were heading into the unknown to fight an enemy they knew nothing about, alongside allies who had considered them too. It's dangerous to be free. It was exactly the kind of impossible situation that humans specialized in. The quarantine was about to end. The Deathworlders were coming. Captain Ben Clark had dreamed of this moment his entire life. Now that it was happening, he wished he could wake up. The used Defiance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Council territory. And what Ben saw through the view screen made his stomach turn. The meeting point was supposed to be a rally point for the Council fleet. Instead, it looked like a graveyard. Dozens of alien ships floated in space, dark and lifeless. Some were torn in half. Others were covered in strange black growths that looked like metal cancer. A few ships were still moving, but slowly, like wounded animals trying to crawl away from a predator. "My God," whispered Dr. Kate Sullivan from her position at the science station. She was the fleet's chief xenobiologist, the person who was supposed to help humanity understand their new alien allies. Right now, she looked like she might be sick. Communications, try to raise the council fleet. Ben ordered Lieutenant Alex Torres worked at his station for several minutes before shaking his head. Sir, most of these ships aren't responding at all. I'm getting weak signals from maybe 6 or 7 vessels. The rest are either dead in space or running on emergency power only. Ben stared at the wreckage floating around them. This was what the mighty Galactic Council had been reduced to. Ships that had once controlled hundreds of star systems were now barely staying alive in the cold vacuum of space. Sir, I'm getting a response, Torres said. It's weak, but someone wants to talk. Put them through. The voice that came over the speakers was tired and broken. Computer translated it from whatever alien language the speaker was using. Human vessel. This is Council Ship Dawn of Hope. I am Captain Veltar. Please, we need medical assistance. We have wounded aboard. Ben looked at his crew. They were all staring back at him, waiting for orders. These aliens had kept humanity locked up for 200 years. They had treated humans like dangerous animals. Now they were begging for help from the very people they had feared. Torres sent a message to Admiral Liu on the Liberty. Tell him what we've found here. Then contact the Dawn of Hope and tell them we're sending medical teams. Yes, sir. Minutes later, Ben stood on the bridge of the alien ship Dawn of Hope. He had seen pictures of alien technology before, but being inside an actual alien vessel was something else entirely. The corridors were too wide and too tall for humans. The air tasted strange. Everything glowed with a soft blue light that hurt his eyes. Captain Veltar was waiting for them in what Ben assumed was the bridge. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and large black eyes. His uniform was torn and stained with something that might have been blood. When he saw Ben and his team, he fell to his knees. Thank you, Veltar said. Thank you for coming. We thought we were going to die out here. Ben helped the alien captain to his feet. What happened here? The Devourers found our rally point 3 days ago, Veltar said. We had 40 ships waiting here. They sent only 5 vessels against us, but it was enough. They tore through our fleet like it was made of paper. Dr. Sullivan was scanning the alien captain with her medical equipment. Captain Clark, you need to see this. She showed him the readings on her scanner. Ben couldn't understand most of the technical information, but the stress levels were clear enough. This alien was dying of exhaustion and fear. Long since he last slept. Sullivan asked, Veltar sleep? Veltar looked confused. I don't know. Maybe 10 days? Maybe more? Every time we try to rest, they find us. Every time we think we're safe, they come. Ben looked around the alien bridge. Other crew members were in similar condition. They moved like ghosts, operating their stations through habit rather than awareness. These weren't soldiers anymore. They were survivors, barely holding on to life and sanity. Captain Veltar, Ben said. We need to know everything about this enemy. How they fight, how they think, what their weaknesses are. Veltar laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Weaknesses? Captain Clark, we've been fighting them for over a year. We've tried everything. Energy weapons, kinetic weapons, biological, warfare, reality, manipulation, technology. Nothing works for more than a few minutes. What do you mean? They adapt, Veltar said. Watch. He pressed some controls on a nearby console. A holographic display appeared in the air, showing a recording of a space battle. Ben watched as council ships fired bright energy beams at strange organic-looking enemy vessels. The first few shots tore through the alien armor easily. Then the enemy ships began to change. Their hulls grew thicker. The energy beams that had been effective moments before were now bouncing harmlessly off the enemy armor. This was recorded 2 months ago at the Battle of Rigel 7, Veltar said. We had them. Our new quantum disruptor weapons were cutting through their ships like they were made of thin metal. But within minutes they had adapted. By the end of the battle, our weapons were useless. Dr. Sullivan was studying the recording carefully. How is that possible? Even with advanced nanotechnology, That kind of adaptation should take hours or days, not minutes. We don't know, Veltar said. Our scientists think they're using some kind of collective intelligence. Every time one of their ships learns something new, all of their ships know it instantly. Ben watched the recording again. The enemy ships moved in perfect coordination, like parts of a single organism. Their adaptation was flawless and instant. No wonder the Council fleet had been destroyed so easily. How many ships do they have? Ben asked. Thousands, Veltar replied. Maybe tens of thousands. They come from the galactic core, consuming everything in their path. Entire star systems disappear. Billions of people gone without a trace. And you've never found a way to hurt them permanently? No, Veltar said. Every weapon we've tried. Every strategy we've used, they learn from it and become immune. It's like fighting an enemy that becomes stronger every time you hit them. Ben was quiet for a long moment, thinking. On the surface, the situation looked hopeless. An enemy that could adapt to any attack that grew stronger with every battle. No wonder the Council fleet was running scared. But Ben had grown up on Earth, learning military history from the greatest warriors humanity had ever produced. He had studied the battles of Alexander, Napoleon, Grant, Patton, and dozens of others. And he remembered something important that the aliens seemed to have forgotten. Captain Veltar, Ben said, you've been fighting them like you fight other civilized species, haven't you? Rules of engagement, predictable tactics, military doctrine? Of course, Veltar said. How else would we fight? Ben smiled grimly. You've never fought like humans. 2 hours later, Ben was back on the Defiance, talking to Admiral Liu over the communication system. The Admiral's face on the screen looked grim as Ben finished his report. So they adapt to every weapon and every tactic, Admiral Liu said. Interesting. With respect, these aliens are terrified. Their entire fleet has been running for months. I don't think they have any fight left in them. Maybe not, Admiral Liu said. But we do. The Admiral's expression changed, becoming harder. Captain Clark, I want you to test something for me. The next time you encounter the enemy, I want you to use the most unpredictable, chaotic attack pattern you can think of. Don't follow any military doctrine. Don't use standard tactics. Just hit them fast and hard and completely randomly. Sir, that sounds like suicide. Maybe, Admiral Liu said. But these aliens have been fighting the same way for centuries. They use careful strategies, planned formations, predictable patterns. The enemy has learned to counter all of that. They've never fought humans before. Ben thought about what the Admiral was saying. Humans had a reputation in the galaxy as unpredictable, chaotic, and dangerous. The aliens had quarantined Earth because they were afraid of what humans might do. Maybe it was time to show them exactly what that meant. What did you have in mind, sir? Admiral Liu's smile was cold and predatory. I want you to do something no civilized species would ever consider. Something so crazy, so reckless, so completely insane that even these adaptive enemies won't see it coming. And what's that, sir? I want you to ram them? Ben felt his heart skip a beat. Sir, that would destroy my ship. Maybe, Admiral Liu said, or maybe it will destroy them. These enemies adapt to weapons and tactics. But they've never had to adapt to someone being crazy enough to use their own ship as a missile. Ben looked around his bridge at his crew. They were all listening to the conversation, and they all had the same expression on their faces. Not fear, but excitement. The kind of excitement that came from finally being able to do something, anything, other than run and hide. When do we try it? Ben asked. Soon, Admiral Liu said. Our scouts have detected a small Devourer patrol heading this way. 3 ships, probably looking for survivors to consume. Perfect for a test. Ben nodded. We'll be ready, sir. As the communication ended, Ben stood up and looked at his crew. These men and women had volunteered to leave Earth, knowing they might never return. They were about to face an enemy that had terrified the entire galaxy, and they were planning to attack by crashing their own ship into the enemy. It was the most human thing Ben could imagine. All hands prepare for battle, he announced over the ship's intercom. We're about to show the galaxy what Deathworlders can do. Outside the view screen, the stars waited silently for humanity to make its mark on the universe. The first Devourer ship died in a ball of nuclear fire, and Lieutenant Ryan Cooper couldn't believe what he was seeing. He floated in his damaged escape pod, watching the debris scatter across space where moments before there had been an enemy, a vessel that everyone said was impossible to kill. His ship, the UES Defiance, was gone too, destroyed in the collision that Captain Clark had ordered. But they had taken one of the monsters with them. "This is Lieutenant Cooper calling any human vessels." Ryan spoke into his emergency radio. "The ramming attack worked." "Repeat." "The ramming attack worked. One enemy ship destroyed, but we lost. The Defiance." The response came immediately. "Cooper, this is Admiral Liu on the Liberty. Are you injured?" "No, sir, just shaken up." "Sir, you should have seen it. The enemy ship tried to adapt its armor when Captain Clark started the ramming run. But there wasn't enough time. We hit them before they could strengthen their hull." Orion looked around at the other escape pods floating nearby. Most of the Defiance crew had made it out alive, thanks to Captain Clark's order to abandon ship at the last second. The captain himself hadn't made it. He had stayed at the controls to make sure the collision happened exactly right. Sir Ryan continued. "There's something else. I'm picking up strange readings from the debris. It's like the destroyed ship is still trying to communicate with something. Can you capture any of that communication?" Ryan checked his instruments. "Yes, sir, I think so. But, sir, you need to send a rescue ship soon. The other two Devourer vessels are regrouping, and they look angry." 12 hours later, Ryan was aboard the research vessel U.S. Discovery, standing next to Dr. Kate Sullivan as she studied the captured alien communication signals. The laboratory was full of equipment that Ryan didn't understand, but he could see the excitement on Sullivan's face. "This is incredible," she said, pointing at the data on her screen. "The destroyed Devourer ship transmitted everything it learned from our attack to the other ships in its fleet."
Ow.
"But that's not the amazing part." "What's the amazing part?" asked. "The information is incomplete," Sullivan said. "The ship was destroyed so quickly that it only transmitted partial data. The other Devourer ships know that ramming attacks are dangerous, but they don't know exactly how to defend against them." Ryan felt a spark of hope. "So we can use the same tactic again." "Maybe," Sullivan said, "but probably not for long. These creatures learn fast. We might get one or two more successful ramming attacks before they figure out how to stop us. Then we need to hit them with everything we have while we still can," Ryan said. Sullivan nodded. "That's exactly what Admiral Liu is planning." The next attack came at the Proxima defense line, where a small council fleet was trying to protect a refugee convoy. Captain Nick Reeves commanded the UES Thunderbolt, leading a group of 6 human ships against 12 Devourer vessels. "Remember," Admiral Liu's voice came over the communication system, "don't use the same attack pattern twice. Keep them guessing. Make them think we're all completely insane." "Understood, Sir," Reeves replied. "All ships," you heard the Admiral. "Time to show these monsters what human creativity looks like." What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded history. Instead of the careful formations and planned maneuvers that the Council species used, the human ships attacked like a pack of wild animals. They came from every direction at once, using tactics that would have horrified any military academy instructor. The UES Storm split off from the group and began spinning like a top while firing in all directions. The EU's Hurricane flew straight up relative to the enemy formation, then dove down at maximum speed. The UES Lightning actually flew backwards while shooting, something that should have been impossible according to standard military doctrine. The Devourers tried to adapt, but they couldn't predict what the humans would do next because the humans themselves didn't know what they would do next. Every few minutes, one of the human captains would try something completely new and unexpected. "This is insane, Captain," Reeves said over the communication channel, but he was laughing as he said it. "Torres rammed that ship on the left. Martinez, can you flip upside down and attack from below? Cooper, I want you to fly directly through their formation and see what happens." "Sir, that's suicide," came Cooper's voice. "Exactly," Reeves replied. "They'll never expect it." Battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, 8 Devourer ships had been destroyed, and 4 more were badly damaged. The human fleet had lost 3 ships, but they had saved the refugee convoy and proved something important. Humans could hurt the Devers, News of the victory spread quickly through what remained of the Council fleet. For the first time in months, alien commanders started to hope that maybe the war wasn't lost after all. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Sullivan finished analyzing the captured Devourer technology. "Admiral," she said, standing in the briefing room aboard the Liberty, "I think I know what these things really are." Admiral Liu looked up from the tactical displays he had been studying. Around the table sat the captains of every human ship in the fleet, along with several council commanders who had joined the human forces. "Go ahead, Doctor," Admiral Liu said. Sullivan activated a holographic display that showed the internal structure of a Devourer ship. "They're not aliens from outside our galaxy," she said. "They're us. Or rather, they're what this galaxy's species used to be millions of years ago." Captain Veltar, the council officer who had first met the humans, leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "They're the result of technological evolution taken to its logical extreme," Sullivan explained. "At some point in the distant past, the ancestors of the current council species decided that biological life was inefficient. They began replacing their organic parts with mechanical ones. They improved their minds with artificial intelligence. They eliminated emotions because emotions were unpredictable." She pointed to different parts of the holographic display. "Over millions of years, they became the perfect adaptive organism. They could survive in any environment, defeat any enemy, solve any problem. But in the process, they lost something crucial." "What did they lose?" Admiral Liu asked. "They lost the ability to be irrational," Sullivan said. "They became so perfectly logical, so completely predictable, that they could only respond to threats in predetermined ways. They can adapt to any weapon, any tactic, any strategy that follows logical patterns. But they can't adapt to something that doesn't make sense." The room was quiet for a moment as everyone absorbed what Sullivan was saying. Captain Reeves spoke. "First, so when we do something crazy, something that no rational being would do, they can't counter it because they can't understand it." "Exactly," Sullivan said. "They've evolved beyond the ability to think like we do. It can't be unpredictable because unpredictability has been engineered out of them." Admiral Liu stood up slowly. "Doctor, are you telling me that our greatest advantage against these things is that we're too stupid to know when we're beaten?" Sullivan smiled. "In a way, yes, sir. They're fighting a logical war against an illogical enemy. No matter how much they adapt, they can't become something they're no longer capable of being." "Then we keep being illogical," Admiral Liu said. "We keep doing things that make no sense. We keep fighting in ways that would get us court-martialed in any civilized military." He looked around the table at the faces of his officers. "Gentlemen and ladies, we're going to win this war by being exactly what the Council always said we were. Dangerous, unpredictable, and too crazy to know when to quit." Captain Chenwei, commander of the UES Dragon, raised her hand.
"What?"
"About the Council fleets? They've been running and hiding for months. How do we get them to fight again?" "We show them how," Admiral Liu said. "We show them that sometimes the best way to fight is to throw away the rulebook and do whatever works." Over the next several weeks, human tactics began to spread through the remaining Council forces. Alien commanders who had spent their entire careers following proper military doctrine began to experiment with chaos. They learned to attack without patterns, to retreat when they should advance, to do things that made no logical sense but somehow worked. The war began to turn. The Devourers, faced with enemies who refused to behave predictably, started to lose battles for the first time in over a year. Their perfect adaptation abilities became useless against opponents who changed tactics every few minutes for no logical reason. But the real test was still coming. Intelligence reports indicated that the main Devourer fleet, thousands of ships strong, was moving toward the galactic core. If they reached the ancient worlds at the center of the galaxy, billions more would die. The final battle was approaching. Humanity would need every bit of their illogical, unpredictable, impossible stubbornness to win it. Ryan Cooper, now promoted to captain after his actions at Proxima, stood on the bridge of his new ship, the USS Defiant, named after the vessel that had started the human counterattack. Through the view screen, could see the combined human and council fleet preparing for the largest space battle in galactic history. Tomorrow, they would either save the galaxy or die trying. Knowing humans, Ryan thought, they would probably do both. The final battle began with a song. Admiral Chen Lu stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty. Watching the largest fleet in galactic history prepare for war, 3,000 ships floated in space around him. Human vessels flew alongside Council. Ships from 40 different species. Zephyrian energy cruisers glowed next to Terran destroyers. Korthok warriors worked beside human marines. For the first time in the galaxy's history, every living species was united against a common enemy. In front of them, blocking the path to the galactic core, waited the main Devourer fleet. 10,000 ships that had once been living beings from 100 different worlds. Now they were something else entirely. Perfect machines of destruction that had forgotten what it meant to hope, to dream, or to choose death over slavery. "Sir," said Commander Julie Parker from her station, "all ships are reporting ready for battle." Admiral Lu nodded. He had spent the last week planning this attack with the best military minds from dozens of species. They had thrown out every rule of warfare, every tradition of military strategy. Today, they would fight like humans. "Open a channel to all ships," Admiral Lu ordered. The communication system crackled to life, connecting 3,000 ships across light years of space. Admiral Lu took a deep breath and began to speak. "Today we fight not just for our lives, but for the right to be imperfect. The enemy in front of us gave up everything that made them alive in exchange for the promise of perfection. They cannot be surprised because they have no imagination. They cannot be brave because they feel no fear. They cannot sacrifice because they have nothing left to lose." He paused, looking out at the vast enemy fleet. "But we do. We have families to protect, homes to defend, futures to build. We have the right to make mistakes, to be foolish, to do things that make no sense to anyone but ourselves. Today, we fight for the right to be beautifully, wonderfully, impossibly human." The response came from 3,000 ships at once. Humans cheering, aliens making sounds of approval in languages that had no names. It was chaotic, unorganized, and completely against military protocol. It was perfect. "All ships," Admiral Lu said, "attack at will. Show them what chaos looks like." What followed was not a battle. It was pandemonium. Captain Tony Martinez of the U.S. Hurricane led his squadron in a spiral pattern that defied physics. Captain Sarah Blake commanded her Marines in a boarding action against a ship that was still moving at full speed. "Commander," Ryan Cooper somehow managed to fly his ship backwards while spinning and firing in 3 directions at once. The Devourer fleet tried to adapt, but there was nothing to adapt to. Every few seconds, the human commanders changed their tactics completely. One moment they were attacking in formation, the next they were scattered across space like leaves in a windstorm. They used weapons in ways they were never designed to be used. They turned their shields into weapons and their engines into bombs. Captain Nick Reeves, commanding the U.S. Lightning, found himself face to face with one of the largest Devourer ships in the enemy fleet. His vessel was outgunned, outarmed, and outnumbered. By every rule of warfare, he should have retreated. Instead, he turned off his ship's gravity. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the intercom. "We're going to try something that's probably impossible. Everyone hold on to something." The Lightning began to spin like a coin flipped in the air. As it spun, it fired in every direction, creating a sphere of deadly energy around itself. The Devourer ship tried to predict where the next shots would come from. There was no pattern to predict within minutes. The enemy vessel was destroyed. But the real surprise came when the Council ships began to fight like humans too, Captain. Veltar, the alien commander who had first asked humans for help, led his ship in an attack that would have been considered insane by Council standards. He flew directly into the middle of the enemy formation, then began broadcasting music at maximum volume while firing randomly. "Captain Veltar," came Admiral Lu's voice over the radio. "What are you doing?" "Learning to be human," Veltar replied. "It's terrifying and wonderful at the same time." Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Zephyrian captains, who had spent centuries following precise energy manipulation protocols, began improvising new techniques on the spot. Nerian commanders abandoned their careful underwater fighting styles and started ramming enemy ships. Even the proud Korthok warriors threw away their ancient battle traditions and began fighting with pure chaotic fury. The Devourers, faced with an enemy that refused to follow any logical pattern, began to break down. Their perfect adaptation systems couldn't handle opponents who changed the rules every few seconds. Ships that had been invincible for over a year started exploding under attacks that should have been impossible, but the battle was far from over. Even with their adaptation systems failing, the Devourers still outnumbered the Allied fleet 3-1. For every enemy ship destroyed, the Allies lost one of their own. As the hours passed, the Human Council fleet began to shrink. "Sir," Commander Parker said, her voice tight with stress, "we're losing ships faster than we can replace them. At this rate, we'll be wiped out in another 6 hours." Admiral Lu studied the tactical display. She was right. Despite their successes, the math was simple. They were outnumbered, and numbers mattered in a battle this large. "Get me Dr. Sullivan," he ordered. Dr. Kate Sullivan appeared on the main screen, calling from her laboratory deep inside the Liberty. Behind her, alien scientists from a dozen species worked frantically at various machines. "Dr. Admiral Lu said, we need a miracle. Do you have anything that can even the odds?" Sullivan's face was grim. "Maybe, sir. We've been studying the communication patterns between the Devourer ships. They're all connected to a central intelligence at the core of their fleet. If we could disrupt that connection, the whole fleet would be vulnerable," Admiral Lu finished. "What do you need?" "Someone would have to get close enough to the central ship to plant a transmission device," Sullivan said. "But sir, that ship is at the heart of their formation. It would be a suicide mission." Admiral Lu was quiet for a moment. Around him, his bridge crew continued to work, coordinating the battle, managing damage control, trying to keep their ship alive for a few more minutes. They were all volunteers who had left Earth knowing they might never return. Now someone would have to make the ultimate sacrifice. "I'll do it," he said finally. "Sir, no," Commander Parker protested. "The fleet needs you. The fleet needs someone crazy enough to fly into the middle of 10,000 enemy ships," Admiral Lu replied. "That sounds like a job for a human." But before he could give the order, another voice came over the communication system. "Admiral, this is Captain Martinez on the Hurricane. My ship is already badly damaged, and my crew is already evacuated to other vessels. Give me the transmission device. I'll deliver it." "Captain Martinez, that's an order for you to stand down, Admiral," Lu said. "With respect, sir," Martinez replied. "You taught us to fight like humans. Well, this is what humans do. We don't let our friends die alone." Before Admiral Lu could respond, dozens of other voices joined the conversation. "This is Captain Blake. My ship can escort the Hurricane partway in." "Captain Cooper here. I'm coming with you, Martinez." Captain Reeves reporting. "Someone needs to watch your back." Within minutes, 20 ships had volunteered to join what everyone knew was a suicide mission. They came from half a dozen different species, united by the human idea that some things were worth dying for. Admiral Lu felt tears in his eyes as he listened to the volunteers. These beings had learned more than just human fighting tactics. They had learned what it meant to be human. "All ships volunteering for the final mission," he said, "you are authorized to proceed. Give them hell." The Suicide Squadron broke away from the main fleet and drove straight into the heart of the enemy. Formation. They flew, without pattern, without formation, without any regard for their own safety. The Devourers tried to stop them, but couldn't predict their movements. One by one, the volunteer ships were destroyed. Captain Blake's vessel exploded while ramming an enemy cruiser. Captain Cooper's ship was torn apart by enemy fire while protecting Martinez's flank. Captain Reeves held the line until his engines failed, then used his remaining power to ram the nearest enemy ship. But Captain Martinez kept flying. His ship was on fire, his life support was failing, and half his weapons were destroyed. But he kept going deeper and deeper into the enemy fleet, until finally he reached the central ship. "This is Martinez," he said over the radio, his voice calm despite everything. "Tell my family I'm proud to be human." The Hurricane exploded against the central Devourer ship, and Dr. Sullivan's transmission device began to work. Across the enemy fleet, 10,000 ships suddenly lost their connection to the central intelligence. For the first time in millions of years, they had to think for themselves. They had forgotten how. Some ships simply stopped moving. Others began firing at their own allies. A few tried to retreat but crashed into other vessels because they could no longer coordinate their movements. Within an hour, a mighty Devourer fleet had destroyed itself. The war was over. Admiral Lu stood on the observation deck of the Liberty, looking out at the debris field that had once been humanity's greatest enemy.